Hello YouTube and welcome to another video. In this one I'm going to be clarifying a few things that I said in the last video. I'm also going to be checking to see what fluid works best or if it makes a difference on what fluid you use to check the volume of a cylinder head. I'm also going to be checking to see if it makes a difference in accuracy whether or not you use a plate over the top. And I have to admit, I made a few statements in the last video that I haven't really verified ever. I've always used this method, and so when I said that the other things weren't as good, it was based on a lot of assumptions. Water has a lot higher surface tension than alcohol, that is true, but how much difference will it actually make in readings, and what difference will it make in the final outcome? I'm also going to be installing the cylinder head to check the installed volume so I can do a compression ratio check because I realized I should have done that in the last video. Also, I said at the end of the last video that I didn't do the compression ratio calculation because of the area that is left behind in the cylinder. There's also another reason, and that reason is because of the dome of the top of the piston. As you guys will see, the result when I bolt the cylinder head on and take the installed volume of the combustion chamber, it's going to be very drastically different, and I will explain why as the video goes on. I now have 20 cc's or 20 milliliters. If you remember from the last video, this head or this dome took 31 cc's or 31 milliliters. So we will now check. I'm also going to check the combustion chamber volume. So let's just get on with it. The spark plug takes actually only about half a cc according to this. Let's not mess about and get this chamber full. Okay, so as far as filling the chamber, I'm coming up with about the same number. We're going to fill this all the way up now. I need to do this fairly quickly so that it doesn't evaporate away. Alcohol evaporates fairly quickly and we don't want that skewing the results. Alright, we got another 20 cc's. Let's see if I'm able to tell when this is up to the top. I'm not looking at the numbers, I'm just looking at the level of the alcohol. See when it reaches all the way around. It's actually a little bit easier for me because I have the O-ring that is kind of holding stuff in place. Alright, so we're within a half a cc without this. And basically, even though alcohol has a fairly low surface tension compared to water, what's happening is the alcohol is actually bulging a little bit up. And so it sticks to the material, it sticks to the aluminum, and when you're filling it out, it's kind of hard to explain, but if I put a blob of alcohol on here, you can see it doesn't just spread out. If I get a little bit of gas, or actually brake cleaner will do the same thing, you will see comparatively the brake cleaner spreads out much more and doesn't make as much of a bubble. And that's not because there's less of it. Do the same thing with water. You can see how the water forms a very, the water almost forms a ball. The alcohol spreads out a little bit, and because the brake clean has a very low surface tension, it spreads out. So now with the gasoline, I will put it here beside the water so that the effect is more dramatic. But you'll see as soon as I touch it to the aluminum, it will fan out very quickly. Hit the water, you can see the gasoline does not form a bead, it just spreads out. Hopefully that explains why I suggested using alcohol instead of water. The water will bulge up more because of the surface tension and actually tell you that you have a larger volume than you actually have. The reason why I suggest using alcohol instead of gasoline is because the gasoline actually has such a low surface tension that it has a tendency to spread out very rapidly and actually cover surfaces that aren't part of the combustion chamber. So as an example of that, if I put the CD case on here, the gasoline would actually reach the CD case, start fanning out as soon as it touched the surface, and it would eat away at the grease, and it could potentially spread across the cylinder head surface and across the surface of the bottom of the CD case, and basically give you a higher volume reading than you actually have. All right, we're gonna do the same test with water now, and as I said, with water, it has a tendency to trap bubbles. You can actually see there's a bunch of bubbles stuck to the plunger, and I'm gonna have to try to work those loose. I've got 20 cc's in there, as you can see. I am now going to fill up the combustion chamber, and you guys will see that this will probably read quite a bit higher than it did with the alcohol. So already we can see I used the full 20 cc's in the combustion chamber. I now have 20 more cc's in there, and the air is mostly out. As much as I can get out anyway. We're going to continue filling this up until it touches around the O-ring, and then we'll see what the volume is. Already it looks like this is probably going to hold about 40 cc's. That's 36, 37, 38, 39, 40. I now have 40 cc's in there, and it's still not touching all the way around. I got another 20 cc's, and I'm assuming this is only going to take a few more. All right, I'm going to call it there. So I put 40, 43 and a half milliliters. The end result is that the water shows 12 more cc's of volume over the alcohol. If you go to any online calculator and punch the numbers in of your engine and then calculate 12 extra cc's of combustion chamber, that is going to drastically change your compression ratio. I went online and I saw a lot of people suggesting to use windshield washer fluid. So I'm going to try that because I'm curious myself. I have no idea what the windshield washer fluid results are going to be, so why not test it? I have some windshield washer fluid here. It is winter stuff, and it's rated to minus 45 degrees Celsius, and because of that it has isopropyl alcohol in it. So this might actually be a really good substitute. I'm assuming that lots of people in warmer climates won't have minus 45 Celsius windshield washer fluid though. I can see already it is forming bubbles a lot more than the alcohol did. There's 20 cc's of windshield washer fluid. Yeah, the surface, let's not speculate. Let's just fill it up. I'm assuming this is going to be a little bit higher than the alcohol though. All right, already, again, like the water, you can see the combustion chamber holds the whole syringe, which was 20 cc's just in the combustion chamber, where when I was doing this test with the alcohol, it only took 17 or 18. I can't remember exactly. Okay, got 20 cc's in the syringe again, and I'm going to continue filling the dome. Let's see how accurate the windshield washer fluid is. Looks like it's going to be better than the water, but all right. There is exactly 40 cc's. The windshield washer fluid, even though it's better than the water, is still showing quite a bit higher than the alcohol. This is 40 cc's compared to 31.5, I believe, with the alcohol. Now what I'm going to do is test the water with a sealed case over the top. And this will probably show more accurate because this is a nice level surface, so as the water bulges up, it will actually touch the case and have a tendency to remain level. The first part of it's not going to be any difference. 20 cc's is just going to fill the combustion chamber. The next part of this is where we're probably going to see the difference. As the water bulges up, it will, oh, there we already have a problem. The surface tension is so high that the water has bulged up and touched the CD case, and so now it's going to trap a pocket of air in there, so it's going to make it very slow for me to add water. If it's not clear what's happening, basically there's an air pocket around the outside and the water has sealed itself to the hole, so in order for the water to get in, that air has to get forced out. And because it's sealed around the side with the grease, that's not readily happening. That's extraordinarily accurate. So with the CD case, if you're lucky enough that it actually pushes all the air out, I am exactly what the alcohol shows. So if you're going to use the CD case and you have it mostly sealed with a small air leak around the side, you will actually get pretty much the same results. And that is because the water is held to a certain level with the CD case, so the bulging or the surface tension of the water doesn't come into play. With that being said, it is a lot slower when you're using water. It's a lot more tedious, and it's a lot more likely that you could make an error because of air bubbles being trapped and because of just all sorts of surface tension issues. So I would still recommend using alcohol. That test proves a couple of things. It proves, for one, that the alcohol, due to its low surface tension, is a lot easier to use. It doesn't trap bubbles and it gives more accurate, consistent readings. It also proves that if you use the case over the top, you are likely to get the same results. They're just harder to come by. So I guess that's a good argument for using a lid over the top of the dome. I also tested the windshield washer fluid, and because it was the winter stuff, it has a slightly lower surface tension than your average windshield washer fluid because it has alcohol in it. And even though that was the case, it still showed quite a bit higher than the alcohol. So it's not expensive to buy. It's easier to use. Just go pick yourself up some methyl hydrate or some gasoline antifreeze. Okay, in order to calculate my actual compression ratio, I need to bolt the head on and then fill up the combustion chamber area with the alcohol. Before I do that, I need to make sure that the alcohol doesn't just run down into the cylinder. So what I'm going to do is use a little bit of assembly goo around the edges of the piston to seal everything together. If it's not clear what I'm doing, the reason why I'm not just using the volume of the head is because you also have to account for, in most cases, the thickness of your gasket and then how far the piston sits down into the cylinder. I've turned the piston down in a little bit just to exaggerate it, but basically pistons don't always sit completely level with the deck. In fact, they almost never do. They either sit a little bit low or a little bit high. And so in my case, it sits a little bit low. So what I'm going to do now, I'm actually going to turn the piston down a little bit to make this easier. I'm going to smear the grease on inside of the bore. I'm going to put a little bit more than I actually need. I've seen it recommended before that you put the piston all the way to the top and then you smear grease around. The problem with that is that you end up with a very, very tiny barrier, and that barrier can be broken very easily, and then all the alcohol can just run into the bottom of your engine. So I smear 1/2 inch or 3/4 of an inch down into the cylinder, and that way when the piston comes up, the seal isn't just around the top edge, it's actually around the cylinder wall itself. If it's not clear, what I'm doing is I have the coupler in my left hand and I'm rotating it back and forth just slightly, and I can feel when the piston is at a dead stop. You need to make sure that you get all of the grease off of the top of the piston and out of the combustion chamber area, because if you don't, you're throwing off the reading. The last thing I had to do before I put alcohol in the dome was make sure that the engine was completely level in both ways. It was kind of a pain in the butt, but I was able to jam some stuff under the back of the jet ski and got it ready. I am assuming that the installed volume of the head is going to be a lot less because of the shape of the top of the piston. Basically, the dome fits nicely into the squish band and combustion chamber, and so the installed volume is not going to be the same as what we saw on the bench, and that's why you want to use this method when actually calculating your compression ratio. So let's get to it. Yep, 20 cc's. 20 more cc's. And I was right. I am coming up on the top of the threads right now. Completely level with the top. I'm not sure if the camera can see that. And it took 25 cc's. In order to calculate the volume of the spark plug threads, I am now going to put the head back down. I've got a piece of duct tape over the threads themselves. All right, let's find out what the volume of the spark plug threads are. There we are. It is 2.5 cc's, and the volume of the spark plug is about 1/2, so we can call it 2. And if you don't understand what I mean by that, we're subtracting the amount of the spark plug thread itself and then adding the volume of the spark plug, or the volume in the spark plug. Alright YouTube, now that we have our numbers, I've found an online calculator and I punched the numbers in. I've chosen 2 for metric. 78 is my bore size because I'm 2 millimeters over. One thing that I didn't mention in this video is that the stroke length, or the displacement of the stroke on a 2-cycle engine, you need to calculate from the top of the exhaust port to the deck of the cylinder. And the reason why you need to do that is because the volume of the cylinder below the exhaust port doesn't actually get compressed. So I think this is what they call corrected compression ratio. And yeah, basically the fuel and air mix only starts getting compressed once the exhaust port is closed. So we are at 40 millimeters for mine because I've raised my port height 2 millimeters. From the factory, that number would be 42 millimeters. 78 millimeters on the gasket bore. I punched that in because I don't actually have a gasket, so it is the full bore of the cylinder. Head gasket thickness, I'm not using that because I've checked the actual volume or the installed volume, and so I don't need that. Combustion chamber volume in cc's was measured to be 25 minus 2 when I calculated for the spark plug thread and the spark plug volume. And then the dome and the deck is also taken into account by using the installed volume, so that's a good reason to do that. And you can see when you look at the bottom there, you can see that my compression ratio is 9.3 to 1. The difference between the front cylinder and the rear cylinder, this number would be 19 if we calculated everything correctly. And so now my PTO cylinder would be about 11 to 1 for a compression ratio. So that's up there pretty high. I know exactly what you guys are thinking right now, and that is, how can anybody possibly turn checking the volume of your cylinder heads into a two-part video? Well, it looks like I've done it. I'm guessing that you guys are getting pretty bored of seeing me play with my cylinder head and checking the volume of it. I do need to increase the volume on the PTO side so that it matches the mag side, so I will be doing that off camera. I'm not sure what's coming up next, but I'm pretty sure that I'm going to be yanking the engine out of the X2 and starting some body work. I'll probably tear the engine down and do a complete inspection on it along the way. I'm not sure how much of that I will film, but that's going to do it for this one. Thanks for watching, and I'll see you next time.